Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fleeting Thoughts, an altered TCG podcast, part of the Maindeck podcast family. I'm Dan.
And I'm Jordan. And today we're going to be going over our personal draft experiences with the game. Now that I've personally had the ability to draft, and Dan, of course, has had a handful of times being able to draft, we'll give you our key insights into what we think is a good strategy and just some general funness that had happened during our games.
Absolutely. Draft, Jordan, is a format that is very close to me as a veteran of many TCGs. I do love exploring a good draft format, and not every TCG actually has one, and some of them try, and it's not
rough.
great.
Yeah, I've definitely played my fair share of games that even some of them, like on paper, I was like, this is going to be so sick. And then I played it and I was like, this is functional, I guess.
Yep.
But never fear, everyone. Altered draft environment is super sick. I loved doing the draft, and you'll hear all about it pretty soon.
I'm really glad to hear that from you, Jordan, because I thought it was great since I tried it, but sometimes you get all wrapped up in excitement for something, and I just didn't know if you were going to have like exactly the same love for it that I did. So that'll be really fun to talk about. Before we jump into that, Jordan, as we're recording this, it is the night before launch. Okay, it's the night before launch.
I know. I'm very excited. I'm so excited.
When we release this,
go ahead.
It'll be out already.
Very
how did your launch go for the listeners? Right, like when this is out, you already had your launch. How did it go?
We haven't had our launch. We had a pre-release.
But the listeners,
the launch went fantastic.
There.
I'm actually mega jazzed about it. We have multiple events lined up, plus that are on the weekend itself, and then we have our regular constructed play day already all set up and in line and in tow. We also had a pre-release, which is what we'll be talking about today, because that's when we did the draft. That was super sick, and actually the turnout was massive for our shop, which was really cool. So it gives me much more excitement for our regular play days. Now that most people have their Kickstarter product, it's gonna be exciting, and I get to play regular sealed during our launch event, and they have both events. We're doing a double event that day. We're going to start off with the starter deck sealed in the afternoon, and then we're going to do a regular sealed pack later on in the day. And we timed them, so if you wanted to, you can do both. For time's sake, I'm probably only going to do one, but I'll be around for half of the first one, just to be there in case they need assistance or rules questions, or if people just want to hang out and chat or just play some casual games while people wait. It'll be very exciting.
Okay, that's very cool. We ended up scheduling ours on Friday night, so we only had time to pick one of the two events. And our area, we've had so far 3 weeks of just open play. Every single open play event so far, we've had more than 10 people showing up, which has just been nice, been good to we have people who are excited playing, a good mix of people, some people bringing new people in the next week, right? Which is really cool. And so when I set up our sealed, we had to choose between them. I thought, let's just do packs, because a lot of these people, like they got Kickstarter stuff, or they bought from the Kickstarter stuff from the shop. They all bought starter decks already and everything. And let's just do the 7-pack one, I think, for everyone. And if we get any new people showing up there, I'm going to take the time to teach them the game, and I'll crack open their packs with them and help them kind of like come up with something. I'm sure we can work it out. But I'm super pumped to play that, or I should say, I had a great time playing it at launch a few days ago when you're listening to this. That's been going really well. It's great to hear that your community has really built up to this. And I didn't realize this, but you must have drafted Kickstarter edition then, didn't you?
We sure did. It was great. We didn't get anyone to get a God Pack, but there was a handful of uniques around the table that were pretty sick, and people were very excited about it. So nice. It was and drafting. It'll be interesting because the draft went over so well that the shop plans on doing like maybe regular drafts, like maybe do once a month draft. Like that would be very interesting. And I'm interested to try the non-Kickstarter editions as a draft as well, because anyone who's opened a lot of Kickstarter probably noticed some interesting sequences in the way the packs are ordered and the distribution of the cards. I know I did. it got to the point that on like pack 200, I could see the first two colors of the first two cards, and I'd be like, okay, outside of the rares, I know exactly what faction is going to be behind which one, which
Wow.
just happens sometimes. It's how the randomization happens at the factory. But from what I've been told, from some of your locals, actually, the distribution in the non Kickstarter packs are going to be a lot more randomized. So I don't know how true that is, but I'm assuming it is. It would make more sense if it was. So that means the draft will be a little bit different because there won't be like certain pairs of cards in packs all the time.
Well, that's interesting. And I all of my opening experiences so far have been opening the packs live, like either recording a video or doing a live stream. So I have not had even close to the mental capacity while I'm opening packs to start to pay attention to anything like that. So that's really interesting to hear. I actually didn't even know about that. I wonder, we did, because I just posted our videos. We did a collab with Red Zone Rogue, where both of us opened boxes and just chatted for a while. We chatted for so long. We did like 2 hours on his channel and then 1 hour here on Main Deck. But I would wonder if you went back and looked at those, if you could like start to figure out if there's, if there is any sort of patterning or if it really is fixed.
Yeah,
It'd be
it'd be
interesting.
interesting to check because I didn't check when I was watching through parts of that video, but it would be interesting. Yeah, and the only real reason I caught it in the Kickstarter boxes because I have a tendency when I open packs of any game, I have these big like card racks that help me organize them, and for me, I found it saves so much time to organize them as I open. So every time I'd open a pack, I'd take the rares, put them in a separate pile so I could look at them and check the unique, and then I'd filter the commons. And I'd started noticing that I'd be like Axiom, Bravos, Axiom, Lyra, Muna,
Mm,
Lyra, and then depending on how many rares they were, it would be the other two factions. And then if it was Bravos Axiom, or if it was one Axiom pack and then Bravos next one, I was like, okay, there was like I think it was like 4 or 5 different permutations, and that's why after a while, like seeing the first two colors, I would just automatically like flip out the cards in the pack because I was like, this is going to be this color, this color, this color. I got it, and it sped up processing of the cards at least.
yeah, that would make it way easier to notice the pattern if you are just actively like moving your hands around and placing them in piles. So
Yeah,
very fascinating. Well, yeah, you'll have to update us, Jordan, on the next episode if you can figure anything out about the distribution here, because we'd like to know.
yeah. So definitely interesting. But yeah, so the events are going to be sick, and I'm looking forward to having already played them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to have a bunch of people who are listening to this episode now who maybe have already done some sealed, and they might, like you, have a store that's looking to run some drafts going forward. I think we're probably going to do the same thing, by the way. It's what we do for Star Wars right now. We just kind of do a monthly draft. Usually people really dig that. And it's not as bad as like trying to pay the draft cost every single week, week after week. That used to be a bit much. So people are going to be looking to do some drafts, Jordan. And in just a moment, we are going to give you guys all of our tips and tricks that you can hopefully kind of rely on to get you going in draft. Draft in every card game is a difficult format because it relies on not just your skill set that you've already developed of playing the game, but another skill set of learning how to draft a deck on the fly, which is like a combination of regular deck building and a whole bunch of like signal reading, draft stuff. So it can be daunting and it can be easy to perform poorly in the draft to the point where like you get the deck built, you play a game and you realize, I know what I did wrong, and unfortunately, I can't fix it now because it was part of the draft process, right? And you
Yeah,
just have to play out the tournament with what you did, and it can be tough to like develop those skills. So hopefully, you guys, after listening to this episode, you'll at least have some good baseline information, a few ideas going into this, where your first maybe we can speed you up a little bit through your first kind of clunkier drafts and get you to a point where you're able to pay a little more attention to that and start to improve yourself a little faster. Um,
for sure. But before
before
we
we
get
jump
into
into
that,
that,
yeah, I was gonna say before
yeah,
we get into that, Dan, I think you have a couple things you want to tell our great audience.
I would love to. Thank you so much. If you guys enjoy fleeting thoughts, if you guys enjoy the Main Deck family of podcasts or Main Deck content in general. We've been trying to be really good about getting altered content out there for the release here. Lots of stuff to cover. We got a bunch more video ideas coming as well. So stay tuned for more of that. But if you enjoy all that, we would really love if you could take a moment, a little bit of your time, a little tiny bit of your effort, and support us by either liking the video, commenting on the video, giving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform, subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet. I could show you guys, I could put up that little picture that all of the YouTubers put up, but as with everybody, the majority of our viewers are not subscribed to us. So if you could take a moment to subscribe if you do enjoy this, we would really appreciate that greatly. It helps us out so much. So thank you all so much for supporting us that way. And then finally, if you play any other TCGs, I know we got a lot of you guys out there who play multiple TCGs, just because Altered isn't on TCG Player. But if you shop for any other card games on TCG Player, remember, we have an affiliate link you can use. That's bit.ly/shoptcgs, bit.ly/shoptcgs. Link is also in the description below. When you use that to shop on TCG Player, it gives us a kickback, and it really does help the channel out quite a bit. So thank you all so much for your support in all those ways. Now, Jordan, what's draft? Let's start there, right? What is draft for the people who don't know, and then we'll move into our tips.
Yes. So, draft is a format in a handful of different card games where you get, for some games it's up to 6 packs, unopened packs of cards, and you will start off by sitting in pods of 6 to 10 depending on the pack size and the game and the format and whatever they recommend. You'll sit in distinct pods and you will take your packs one at a time and open one pack. You will look at the contents of that pack. You will select a single card of it, and then you will pass. Generally, it goes left, right, and then continues on until all the packs are open. So you will pass to the left, and then you will take the pack that is passed to you. You will look at all those cards. You will take one card out of that pack and continue on, so on and so forth. A lot of time, I'm going to say this because I know not everyone is drafted. It's a very good courtesy rule. And some stores say it as an actual rule for drafting. Some don't mention it, but you should always do what I think they refer to as the Highlander rule. You should only ever have one pack in one place at a time. And what that means is you should have one pack that is to your left or right that's ready to be passed to the next player, one pack in your hand, and one pack that you're ready to grab. You can have less than one, but only one. And the reason why is because sometimes people tend to stack the packs, like they're going really fast, they already know what they want to grab, and then you have like 3 stacks next to them, and the next person's like, which is the next pack? Like, what do I grab? Is this pile like your cards? Is this a pack you're supposed to be passing? And like, it doesn't seem like it would create a lot of confusion, but the second you're in a draft and your head's in that space and you look over and there's like 4 piles and you're like, what's the next one I'm supposed to grab? Because the sequencing is important because there's a certain number of cards in each pack. And yeah, so just always do that etiquette where you only have one pack in your hand that you're selecting from, one pack that you're already set there waiting to pass, and one that you're waiting to receive. You just got to be patient because you can't open the next pack anyway until everyone's done selecting. So you might as well just wait for the process to iron out.
Yeah, and I think we maybe breezed a little bit through this, but so in a draft, people are going to be opening the packs, and they don't just open them and, as you said, they don't just open them and put them in a pile, but they're going to select one card at a time, and then pass that pack in the whatever direction it is based on where they're at in their sort of the number of packs they're opening that day. So you're going to start off with a pack that has, they can do this 14 cards. You pull out the token, right? You have 14 cards in it. You're going to take one of them and put it in a pile, and those are the cards that you are now going to build with, and in the majority of cases those are also the cards that you now own, right? There are occasions in the history of TCGs where people have done really weird versions of draft where like you draft everything and then at the end everyone piles everything together and then the winners like choose which cards they want to keep or whatever. It goes like,
That's
I don't know if you've
wild.
ever heard of that. It's whack. It's dumb. It's too complicated and unnecessary. Usually you whatever you draft, you keep, and that's what you build your deck with. So you take one card out of the 14 card pack, then pass the rest to the left. Then you are passed a 13 card pack because the person to your right already took one out of it. Then you take one card, pass the 12 to the left, and you're passed a 12 card pack, etc. So you do that until you empty the pack. I just wanted to go through that in detail because I know there are going to be people out there who are literally like glazed over, like, I don't know what any of that means. So hopefully that makes more sense. And once you finish with a pack, then you in altered we do a 4-pack draft. So then you take the second pack, sealed booster pack, and then you open it up, and then you repeat that, except this time you're passing to the right. And then you do that for the third pack to the left and the fourth pack to the right. And then once you have drafted all 4 packs, the whole table has drafted all 4 packs, then you all sit down and you get to build your decks, and then you play a tournament, right? Um, so Jordan, tell tell me tell me what is exciting about draft is what we call a limited format. Same with sealed deck, right? So it's where you have a limited amount of cards to work with rather than just using your collection to build a deck. Um, what is exciting about draft sealed limited in general? What do you like about it?
One of the things that I really like about it is it allows certain cards or even just full archetypes to shine in a new light that they otherwise would not have been able to. There's a lot of games where there's certain cards that you look at and you're like, this isn't all that great. Like, when would I want to play this? Like, there's very niche situations. But in limited and sealed, they can be powerhouses. I'm gonna grab from a different game here, just as an example. Grand Archive has a card called Eager Page.
Yeah, I
This
know this
card
one.
in normal, you don't even need to know what the card does. All you need to know is in normal play, no one plays this card unless it's a meme or they're a new player that just likes the art or something. Like this card, if you'd ask any professional player of Grand Archive, they'd say this card is just bad. In Sealed, however, it is a powerhouse because certain facets of the game in Sealed aren't as how do you say, consistent. You can't consistently do certain stuff, so it allowed this card to run rampant. And in Altered, you can see cards like that just as easily. Where in Constructed, it may not be the most powerful, but in a sealed deck, especially in Draft, because in Draft and Altered, one of the key features is you get to draft up to three factions. So there's certain cards that might seem lukewarm in regular play, but if you're able to combine that card with a card that normally can never play with it, all of a sudden you might have this super sweet combo that you didn't think was possible, but is possible in this format specifically.
Yeah, and the eager page, we played like one sealed deck together, and you crushed everybody with that card. It was insane. And we were all like, "Oh, what a bad card!" And like, "Oh, we're losing to it now." So that was hilarious, and is a great example of just what people can expect. Now you mentioned I think a really really key part about limited in altered in general. All the limited formats are using this rule, but the 3 faction thing. I want to just clarify the wording so it's not confusing to everybody. You When you're drafting, you're allowed to take whatever cards you want to. Doesn't matter what faction they are. But when you build your deck in limited format, that's where you have a 3 faction limit instead of a 1 faction limit. Um, Additionally, in almost every game I know of, including Altered, the rarity, excuse me, the card quantity restrictions, but in Altered also the rarity restriction is completely removed from the equation as well. So if you manage to draft 30 rares, go for it.
Yeah, or
You
let's
can
say
play
you
them.
get 5 uniques of the exact same character, you can play all 5 in that deck, assuming the
Yeah, if
color is correct.
in Star Wars Unlimited, I did a draft at Gen Con where I got 4. Actually, at one card, I got 5 copies of it. I didn't play all 5, but I had 4 copies each of some insane cards, and that's a 3 of limit game. And so my deck size is smaller in draft, and I had more copies than I could have of that card normally in a full size deck. It was insanely consistent. It was so cool. Um, so yeah, that's an important rule, the 3 faction thing, and that I think is well, I'm going to put a pin in that because that's going to be a big part of this discussion. I think in just a little bit. I'm going to mention a couple other rules that I just want to make sure we've clarified about how the draft format works before we really dig into what makes that so unique. So in draft format, you're drafting a 30 card deck instead of playing a 40 card deck. And just like with the 40 card deck, the 30 card deck includes your hero, but because of how that draft system works, you may not actually have a hero and you don't need a hero, right? So heroes are drafted in your packs just like every other card. And if you choose to never take a hero, or if you only take heroes that are outside of the three factions that you end up deciding to play in your deck, then you're just going to have a hero-less deck. It's quite advantageous to have a hero. I would never say that you should avoid getting a hero or anything. The hero not only gives you access to an ability every single turn, which you're going to want, but as it counts as one of the 30 cards in your deck, it reduces your deck size very slightly from 30 to 29, but that allows you to very slightly more often see the better cards that you drafted and have a very slightly more powerful deck because of that.
For sure, for sure. That was gonna double down on that point. Just I told the people that at the draft when we were doing it here as well. Is like you don't need a character in your deck, but I highly recommend you use one because you're doing yourself a disservice by not having one. And just to kind of do a little bit of a jump forward here as far as strategy is concerned when drafting, I would think to draft at least one potential hero fairly early on just to make sure you have one locked in. Don't assume the hero you want is going to come to you, or don't assume that no one's going to pick this hero in pack 4. It'll make its way back to me, because I guarantee you, anytime you say this card will make it back to me, I don't need to worry, it's not making it back to you.
Yeah, that bit me in my very first draft. I was trying to play an Argent and Spike deck, and it was like pack 1. I passed an Argent. I'm like, I got 3 more packs, and the card I want in this pack, there's a card I want more in this pack. I really want to get it for the deck. I guarantee I will see another Argent and Spike. And it got to about pack 3, halfway through pack 3, and I was like, I'm in danger. This Argent is not coming, and I need to find another hero right now. So, um, yeah, living proof of that. Definitely something that we'll probably reiterate again later as we go through some of the tips. But definitely an important thing to keep in mind. So you're in a draft, and as you said, Jordan, you're going to be building a deck that is likely full of powerful interactions that aren't even necessarily possible because of the 3 faction thing, or are ones that aren't actually normally that good, but in the limited format where sort of the power level is pushed down a little more, they can actually be quite good. I agree with you totally. That is one of the things that makes me super excited about playing limited every time. For me, it's just that unique gameplay experience, seeing cards that I don't normally get to see. Now, Altered is a really interesting game because I think a lot of Altered's card pool is quite playable. I find that there are, I don't know if there are cards in the set that I would say are not constructed playable. How do you feel about that?
I was gonna say that as well. When I first originally said that, it occurred in my mind that I was like, Altered has a bit of an asterisk next to it because other games generally have that, where there's cards where you're like, I'm never gonna play this. But in Altered, I don't think there's any cards that are quote unquote not playable. They would be maybe not playable in certain deck types, but
Mhm.
almost every card, I can look at a card and be like, I can see a deck where this is gonna shine. There's been very few cards I think that I've looked at and I'm just like, this is just never worth playing. And sure, maybe that opinion might change with time, but in our current day with the first set, which has a lot of cards, I don't think there's any card where I'm like, this has no place in any deck. I haven't seen that yet.
There may be some that are more niche, especially if we start talking about uniques, right? The unique
Mm-hmm.
thing is a different discussion entirely,
Yeah, we're probably
ultimately.
gonna have a
But
podcast on just our thoughts on the unique system in general. Now that we've
oh,
actually got our hands on it and got to see a fair amount, because I know that's going to be an interesting topic at some point.
yeah, I think that's a great. We'll have lots of. There's so many like when the marketplace launches, there's going to be so many things that we'll just have to like you and I will just have to talk about. Not even not even necessarily because we're doing a podcast, but just you and I need to talk about them just because it's interesting to explore. Um, but yeah, so I think maybe there's some commons that are like you would only play this if you really need a drop at this, like you need a 2-drop in your deck because you filled the deck with the rest of other stuff, and you're looking at the stats and you're like, yeah, these stats are maybe going to work. I don't know. I'm thinking like stuff like Frog Prince in Ortis. Like it's just a vanilla. It's got a 303 stats. And when do you play that in the deck? Just kind of when you need a 2-drop with some stats, right?
Yeah.
But that said, that's a thing you need in constructed too. It's a thing that you can't just write off necessarily, or you'll get crushed by Bravos or something like that, where they're gonna put stats down right away, and
Yeah, in a
yeah,
game where you only need to beat your opponent by one in sometimes one of three locations, having a cheap body that has a fair amount of stats for that price in a specific, zone, very relevant still. Like you said,
yeah,
like sometimes you're like, I have low amounts of green cards. I need green coverage. I need forest coverage. Frog has good green coverage and he's cheap. Throw him in there.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's also that's another level of deck building that only the dedicated Lyra players are really looking at right now. If you're a dedicated Lyra player, I'm looking at you. I built a Lyra deck recently, and I sat there and I was mathing out my regions a little bit too. I'm like, I cannot put this card in because I have like literally one card that has forest on it, and this I was building a rock and kibble, all right, so like everything was zeros all over the place. I had to deal with that. Deck is sweet now, by the way. I really like that deck. It's really fun.
Yeah. I
Um,
just foregoed the whole winning expeditions, and we're all about making a festival happen in my
oh
Lyra
God,
deck.
I have been hearing some stories about that. Oh, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about festival. Probably have its own episode, I bet, at some point. That'll be kind of fun. Um, okay, but Jordan, given that we decided that largely the card pool is constructed, playable, and altered. By the way, congratulations. That's not something every card game can say. That's awesome. So where does the fun come in then in playing draft? Like, is it? I mean, the cool thing about draft is everyone being on even footing, right? That's always been something that's been kind of a nice equalizer about limited formats. Also, that's the way I've always pitched them to newer players, being like, look, you join this game. The game is like 50, 100 years old, like Magic right now. And how do you possibly play with these ingrained Magic players who are literally ancient and know everything about the game like myself? Well, like myself years ago, not anymore. I'm a little out of it. But um, how do you compete with them? Well, if you just start from scratch, here's a new set. You both draft it. They only have the edge on drafting, basic skill set and kind of analyzing cards. But you short up your potential for winning the game quite a bit more, which is kind of nice. That said, though, again, in altered, where's the fun? And I think you'll agree with me that the fun of this limited format now, given that everything's already playable, is this 3 faction mixing thing. Um,
100%. And the fact that something that just draft and sealed bring to the table in general, that limiting factor of limiting your deck, giving you not all the pieces to the puzzle, and then you as the player have to figure out how to put those pieces together in a way that
mm,
brings you as much success as possible. I love just being like, I can't just default to my favorite cards that I know get the job done. I have to be like, well, I have this, crew of characters that normally wouldn't go together. I need to find the best permutation to make the best 29 cards out of what I got and make it work and find the secret sauce hidden within.
that is the thing that I love about, in particular, sealed deck over draft in that case, because sealed deck is the one where you just crack open in alternate 7 packs and then you build a 3 faction deck out of them. And the sealed pools can be so fun to try and figure out. This is gonna sound weird. I especially love the terrible pools. When you get a terrible pool of cards, you look at your cards, you open, you're like, I open nothing good here. Then it's like it becomes the ultimate puzzle. It's like I have to turn this pile of straight garbage into something that can win potentially like 3 matches today. And I've had more success than I think would be expected out of doing that, because when you really work at it, you can find these angles and you're like, look, like half of my rares are in this color, but this color is bad. I can't play this thing. And you find these little synergies in these other colors or factions or whatever and throw them together. And suddenly, like, you edge out wins over your opponent with that. Nothing feels better. Nothing feels better than that. Seriously. And like in card gaming, okay, fine. Opening the golden booster, etc. Like that feels really good. But as far as gameplay is concerned, I think it's so satisfying to find that sort of like that mix of cards that does the trick. And in sealed, it's like they just give you whatever. In draft, I like you're weaving around as you're doing that draft, trying to land on what the right combination of cards is. That's where I kind of find that fun. It's like I'll start off in one color. I'll like first pick will be Ortis. Boom, easy. Next pack, ooh, really good Bravos card here. Few more packs of some good Bravo stuff, and then I go, if I started taking some of this Muna stuff, that might be really good, but then I don't know if I'm going to play that Ortis thing. And you start maneuvering around a little bit. And that, I think that is like one of the most fun parts of the draft experience itself. And it's enabled by this 3 faction thing where you're going to find these combinations of different factions and the different card effects. And the one that, I always reference to people because it's really easy. It's like, how Atlas is good, Jordan, right? Atlas is
Oh yeah,
the
we
five
love
hand cost.
Atlas.
Yep, he's the gigantic 3/3/3 gigantic man. 3/3/3, right?
Yeah, the regular one.
Okay.
The
Suddenly I thought
Ortis
my
one is
brain.
1/1/1.
I was yeah. I was doubting myself suddenly. 3/3/3 gigantic for 5, right? Really cool. And Bravo certainly has things that are going to that you can use to put some boosts on him, which is great. But I always like the easy references go. You know how he's cool? Like, what if you could play all in and roll a 6 and put 6 boosts on your Atlas? How good would that feel?
But you already
Um,
can do that in constructed.
all-ins and Bravos.
Allin's faction shifted rares, Bravos, yeah.
I forgot that. Okay, well, it's a terrible example then. But you know what? When I explain it to a new player, they don't know that, right? They've just seen the starter deck. So I forgot that was the faction. The all-in. There are,
but
like,
you could
600 rares or something.
All in Son of Yggdrasil and then anchor him with your Muna cards.
Okay, there we go.
That's
great
not something
example.
you can normally do.
There we go. Okay, yeah. Well, that is though. I mean, that's an easy example then of just the kind of exciting interactions that you get to look for in draft. I think what we should do next, Jordan, is just to hammer that home. Let's talk about some of the decks we've drafted and some of the cool interactions that we've been able to utilize. Do you want to start since you're fresh on it?
Yeah, that sounds like a grand plan. So in my draft, just a quick rundown of the deck. We had Bravos, we had Axiom, and we had Ysmir. And I started off hoping to do Axiom. My plan going in was I wanted to get Subhash and Marmo, and I wanted to get cool stuff with that because I was like, I know there's a lot of cards in all the other factions that have good reserve plays, and a lot of them don't have the ability to put stuff in reserve, so you have to do the delayed, play it, wait to go reserve naturally, and then play it again to get it. And I was like, with Subhash and Marmo, I'm going to get a free bug and get to start getting value on those early cards quicker. The problem is I never got a Subhash and Marmo, so I immediately had to pivot out. My first pack also just showed me some straight Ysmir gas, and I was like, I have some good cards here. I'm going to immediately pivot. I'll go to the Subhash and Marmo if it ends up working. Spoiler alert, I was very sad I didn't just all in on the Subhash thing because I had passed like 6 Copperellas and then Capelias. I always call her Copperella for some reason. And then in the last pack, the second to last person's pack that rotated around, had a Subhash and Marmo, and I was like, if I would have been taking all these Capelias, I'd be set
No.
for the whole game. Uh,
No.
but earlier on, I ended up taking Cujo, or not Cujo,
Kojo.
Kojo. Kojo,
Kojo. You
yeah,
were
Kojo
so
and Buddha.
close.
Yeah, Kojo and Buddha, just because, fun fact, early tip, when you do pick a character that you can see, it's good to grab a character that just has a good all around ability. Not because grabbing one that doesn't is bad, it's just in a situation like draft, like you're going to hear me and Dan say, where your choices are, like I just said, I immediately had to pivot what my plan was. It'll just give you value all the time rather than having to be like kind of shoehorn you into this play style that you may not even get cards for. So I ended up
Hmm.
getting Kojo, and we blasted with him from the game. I ended up pivoting into Bravos shortly before getting him because I got some other great Bravos cards. So then after pack two, I was like, securely in Ysmir and Bravos. And I had a couple Axiom cards because I was trying to keep the dream alive. And I was like, these are just generally good cards, like having Scrambler and Tinkerbells because I wanted access to Sabotage. And I was like, these are easy grabs, and I don't have a third color yet. So I can just have that be my like supplemental third color. So I had a forefront of Bravos and Ysmir. Some of the early stuff that I got, I ended up getting four uh, Sakabrus or
Four Sakara
Sakarabus.
brews?
Yeah, and I got two mana channelings and a tiny gin, and I was like, "This is going to be the fastest Sakara brews ever." Sadly, that's the one strategy in the deck I never got to perform the entire day, and I was
Oh,
like,
no.
"Oh, it was such a good setup," but I had some other stuff going on that also kind of like kicked off. I was able to get a brass bug hive and finagle my Buddha when I needed him. There was the what's it called, small step giant leap. I got a rare
Mm.
one of those, and in fact, I opened a pack that had a rare one and a regular one, and I was like, one of these is not making it back. But that combined with the mana channeling made for some very early pickups because I was able to just get to two away and then defend out and just be like, well, I played this. You have to beat me this turn, or I'm playing this again and you lose. Or you have
Yeah.
to sabotage it or something. And then the sabotages I put in there came in really clutch. One of the harder matches that I had later on in the day was a Subhash and Marmo, and he didn't have a lot of draw potential. So me sabotaging everything all the
Mm.
time made him get really gutted later in the game.
Yeah. That's so cool. And especially hearing like things like the ramp strategies coming together. The thing that I found really, really neat about Altered compared to a lot of other TCGs, I'm going to say this right now, by the way. I'm going to say this right now. I want people to know, again, I have played a lot of draft types in a lot of different card games. Altered is one of the best draft games I have ever played. I think it is actually one of the best games for drafting um, that has been made. Is clear that drafting had a good, like it was intended to be a part of the game from early on. And the thing that I find really, really, really cool about Altered's draft is how the set is structured, with every common having a rare version, every rare having a common version in particular, is that you get these packs that have just multiple bomb cards in them, like big, like power, like you're floating through the pack, you're like Hydrocana, Kraken, Small Step, Giant Leaf. I'm still in the commons. I'm still in the commons, and these are just like game ending cards, right? Um, and you have the rares that have just like really valuable one drop, really valuable three drop, Hydrocana, whatever. They're all going to be there. Um, and that has just led to, I think, it feels like drafts are so flexible in when you can take what you need to take, and like how you can hone in on like a ramp strategy in some games is difficult to build into in a draft, because you need to not only find ramp, but you need to find things to ramp into. And in a game where it's like every pack has one rare, and that rare is the rares in every game could be powerful one drops to powerful 10 drops, but the commons are like never going to be powerful 10 drops. and they're mostly going to be weak one drops, you know. So out of all your rares in, X other game, maybe one or two of them you find are going to be cards you want to ramp into, and the rest are just going to be not in your color, low mana value stuff, like what is just, stuff that doesn't fit. Whereas in Altered, it's like, yeah, like if you pick up early Tiny Gins, you pick up early mana channelings, whatever, you grab that stuff, no question. You are going to build ramp. You're going to find so many monsters as long as you, especially if you keep your factions open, which we'll talk about in a little bit. You'll find monsters and you can go to town. And I think that is such a freeing and cool thing about the draft, that combined with the 3 faction thing. So I want to talk about my drafts recently. Um, at Gen Con, Jordan, you and I are best friends for a reason, right? It's that I also was trying to draft Subhash and Marmo, both drafts. I love Bash. I think Bash is so cool. I think the ability to put a card in reserve to get a brass bug at the cost of 1 is like so interesting to play around, because you have the cards that are the same value out of reserve, like fleeting and landmarks. You have the cards that have abilities you want to activate that turn, support abilities you want to activate that you can set up. And you have things like Capelia that are like, yeah, built to just like boom, boom, do the thing, engine time. Um, so the first draft, I tried so hard. I was taking landmarks. I'm like, I'm going to take some of these landmarks, and my goal is I'm going to get a bash. I'm going to put the landmarks in here. I'm going to play the landmarks out, and I'm going to do some other. I was like finding some other cards to do some stuff, and just never saw bash. Right? Never came up. Never came up. It was like pack 3 or 4. I think it was pack 3, maybe towards the end of pack 3. I finally found a Sierra and Oddball, and I was like, close enough. All right, we're just whatever. I at least have a hero. I'll play Sierra, and then I had to pivot a little bit. Like I got to make sure I take. Oh no, that was the draft I really screwed up. I'm gonna go ahead and embarrass myself. But then I was like, oh, I got to pivot to take low cost um, landmarks, because look, in my defense, Sierra and Oddball started off with an effect that triggered on anything, and I
Busted.
just yeah, it was busted right away. And I just forgot which side it was, whether it was high or low cost ones in the moment. And it was a busy weekend. And I just like, I took it and I just like didn't even read the card. I'm like, yep, she triggers on 3 cost or less, which is wrong. It's 3 cost or more. Um, so, so yeah, so I played my first game, like, and like died. And I was like, man, that was so good. It's too bad I didn't have any more landmarks to trigger Sierra. And then I like looked at the card and I'm like, oh, I'm an idiot. Like, I did have a bunch of high cost landmarks in my deck, and I like specifically just didn't use her when I played them, which was like a brilliant move. Um, so that deck didn't really come together. It was like kind of whatever. The second draft was, and I did talk about this a little bit on a previous podcast. So I'm not going to go too into detail, but it was the Subhash and Marmo deck, and specifically the things I was most excited to. This deck was Axiom, Ortis, Lyra. Okay, so very different than the deck you were trying to put together. And what I ended up with was a super cool deck that had things like Paper Herald in Ortis, which is a really cool card because you get to go pay 1, put it in reserve, put a 2/2 out, and then sack it, put a 1/1 out. So you pay 1 mana for 3/3/3 power, which is pretty cool. And then I had several copies of Anansi, who says he gets boosted for every card in each player's reserve. So that's really fun because it's really easy in Bash to get 3 or more cards in your reserve on your turn. And then if your opponent's got some stacked up right away, you'd be like, yep, put this down. He's like a 7/7/7 or something for 3. um, which is it's just cool. It was the fun synergy. I was trying to find fun synergies like that. I had Capelias, I had some other cool stuff that I was working with, but that Lyra and Ortis like kind of worked together. And then Ortis gave me some cool landmarks again. Like I think I ended up with a carrier, and I think I had a monolith too. If I maybe had 2 monoliths actually. I had some juice where I was like, yeah, I'm definitely gonna put this down early. Oh, and I think I had a Foundry Engineer too. That's another one where it has the support ability to sack to make a landmark cost less. It was like
Hmm.
when I all this stuff was coming together, like this feels so good. Like I can Foundry Engineer in here, play the Ortis Monument for cheap on turn 2, and then I had a Brass Bug on turn 1, which probably got me some action. So yeah, that was super fun. My first draft, and this might be what a lot of people's first draft experience is. I didn't know what I was doing, and this is the draft that took place in January this year when I was up in Paris. So it was with other. It was like with two playtesters, and then a few of us who had no clue what we were doing. And all I did was drafted a bunch of end game removal stuff. Like I had Small Step, Giant Leap, I had Celestial Blast, and I think I just drafted some like Ortis stuff to make some tokens. And oh yeah, I was playing Fen and Crowbar in Lyra as my hero, and my plan was I'm just gonna make. I'm gonna get cards. I'm gonna get cards and then play spells. I don't know. That was the whole strategy I had. It worked though. I wrecked somebody. I was like, "Yeah, just Celestial Blast your stuff," and I have a million cards, so I just never run out of cards. It was cool. Um, yeah. So that's those were my experiences with a few of the drafts I've done, and I've really had a lot of fun each time. Been waiting to draft like a really aggressive deck. I need to like make sure to prioritize my next draft. Do like Bravos, Muna, some stuff like that. That's the big thing I haven't done.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, stepping forward, we want to go over some tips and tricks now that you guys have heard our great experiences with draft. And we'll get you up to snuff so you can have your best experiences in draft ahead of you. How's that sound, Dan?
Yeah, I think that's great. I was helping some people at Gen Con with a little bit. I've developed a few tips and tricks to lay out. So let's do it. Let's get them out, that info out there.
Yeah, I'll go over some quick tips here. Some of the stuff I know that'll help the most. We've already said one before, but we'll say it again. Please draft a character, preferably at least one sooner rather than later. Even if it's not your first pick, make sure you at least pick one just so you have an option, because a hero is better than not a hero. The next big tip I'd give is, even though it's exciting to think about the three factions, for your first pack and a half, commit or try to commit to just one faction so you get a good baseline of your deck before you start branching out and seeing what sort of support you need for that deck. Those will probably be some of the two most impactful tips, outside of some like signaling tips, which we'll go over in a bit. What about you, Dan? What are your biggest tips just for a starter out of the gate?
Yeah, that the thing you said, the second thing you said, especially about locking yourself into colors, like do not go into this draft going like, yeah, I think it would be really good to draft Bravos, Muna, Lyra. Like that's gonna be the thing I'm gonna draft. And don't like just lock yourself in and go like, oh, first pack, better take one of those three, better take, like I think it's really tough to lock into just one faction for an entire pack. I think that is kind of difficult to do because you will ultimately you'll take some lower power cards when you get deeper into the pack. The idea is that as this pack has gone around the table, there are X number of best cards in the pack, and they've been taken, right? So you get to the point where you're taking this stuff. It's like this is okay, this is filler, this is a decent character, but nothing too crazy. Um, it's more helpful if you can kind of stretch out a little bit, and I think go for just two factions within your first pack and a half. I think that's fine. You don't want to lock into three though right away for sure. And also don't consider yourself locked into the first thing you take. Don't go like, well, I took this card. I'm now playing Ortis. Um, that is a way to head to your downfall pretty quickly. We'll talk about why that is in just a second, because that's going to relate a lot to like signal reading and stuff like that. But the biggest piece of advice that you can take from both Jordan and I is just limit yourself to at most two factions in the first draft. Try to take the best cards you can out of those factions. Try to find the ones that have the best synergy together. But if you do start to take a third faction, definitely don't consider yourself locked into that. You're going to want to read some signals and then figure out what your third faction is going to be. And I think everything else I have to say is really going to relate more to signal reading. So, Jordan, why don't you go through what you were going to say? Start with that, and then we'll bounce back and forth a little bit.
Yes. So, signal reading. This is a very, very important, nuanced piece of drafting. That is a skill that you can hone, but never fear, we are here to help guide your opening experience with it. So, long story short, what signal reading is as Dan said in the beginning, you're going to be getting past, 13 card pack, 12 card pack, 10 card pack from two different directions over the course of the draft. Signal reading is kind of noticing which types of cards are being taken from both of those sides. So you can then decide a little bit more accurately what good cards might come your way. If you notice the person to your right seems to never pass you any Bravos cards or any good Bravos cards, there's a fair chance that they or the person next to them that is passing to them are taking those cards, meaning you probably, unless you open that pack, you're not getting Bravos cards. So that would be a good chance to be like, maybe I should pivot out of Bravos. I got a killer card right away in my first pack, but if you only have the one killer card, that doesn't make a deck. And of course, the same thing happens on your left side. Let's say the left side person never sends you any Ortis or Ysmir cards. That'll kind of help you shape, well, maybe I should then focus on the three factions that I keep consistently getting past. It'll just give you a better choice selection in your packs. And more often than not, you'll get a better pool in general because you'll have higher value cards because they weren't taking them.
Yeah, like no joke, folks. This is going to sound like something that is hyperbole or something out of like a really, well, I guess it would be a really weird movie, or like a magic trick or something. But the really good professional drafters in other card games, games like Magic the Gathering, where they literally can do it professionally and they make their living off of doing it. Uh, it's not that challenging for them to get to the end of a draft and with nearly 100% accuracy tell you what the people that are left and right are drafting. And actually, with not 100%, but decent accuracy, figure out what other people even deeper into the table have drafted. It's like exactly which colors they're drafting. Um, it's it is the kind of thing where it is a skill that you hone over time to be able to figure this out. And there's a lot that goes into it because number one, you have to remember the cards in your pack. That sometimes is very helpful. Um, if you look at your pack and you go, okay, there's a Hydrocana in that, you can like find some cards that are good, like landmarks to note. Like if someone is drafting a Hydrocana, then they're obviously in Muna, and you can start to also make assumptions about what else they might be interested in based on like what that card is like. Um, and you're going to note like some of the standout cards in that pack. You're going to pass it around. If you open that pack up and you are drafting at an 8-person pod, you're going to take the 14th card out of that pack. The first card, let's just for the sake of it say the 14th card of that pack. Then there's 7 more cards are going to get taken out of that pack. So by the time it gets back to you, you're just going to have a 6 cards left in it. So you can look at those 6 cards and see, hey, what's still in here? That helps give you a good read on like what the whole table is doing to a degree a little bit, because if the Hydrocana is still in there, you go, wow, no one's interested in kind of doing ramp Muna stuff right now. Because that'd be a card that would probably go pretty quick if they were interested in doing that. Or other good cards to look at are like removal cards. In limited formats, by the way, we should have probably said this earlier, but in limited formats, historically in other card games, we've used little mnemonics and stuff to help remember priority lists basically for what are the best types of cards to put in your deck. So an example in Magic the Gathering, we used bread, which stood for B for bombs. First thing you want to take is if it's a big old bomb, you put it in your deck because it'll win the game on its own. R was for removal. Second thing is your opponent's going to play a big old bomb. You got to get it off the table or you're going to lose. So you want removal. E was for like evasion, which would be like things that can get around what your opponent's doing. So they can't block this stuff. That kind of, so it doesn't matter if for altered necessarily, but altered is going to have its own set of priorities as well. Based maybe a little more on the synergies that you're looking for in the game compared to other games. But I would look at cards like Banishing Gate and Off You Go and stuff in Izmir that are like just really solid removal options. Dorothy Gale, there's another great one. Um, if you're playing Izmir, those are cards that you're pretty quickly going to put in your deck because there might be a key part of your strategy. Unless you're doing like a, like an Aphanis, and no, even Aphanis would do it. I don't know if you're putting Izmir in your Bravos deck to use some of the boost counter shenanigans. There's maybe you don't care as much, but a lot of Izmir players are going to want that stuff. So those are really good landmarks. I think this is the best way to call them in packs to try and pay attention to see, wow, this pack went around the table and these cards are still here. And what that can tell you right away is if people are either people are not drafting this faction, or if people are drafting this, they're either maybe drafting weird things or they're drafting this faction kind of tertiarily, right? So if you're like passing left, all the people to your left maybe are like they're just they're not that interested necessarily in taking that stuff. That means in your next pack, they're also more likely to pass you more of that stuff because the pack's going to come from your left and the next one is going to go to the right. Um, so a lot of the times you can try and figure out, okay, like, when I'm getting past cards from the right, I'm seeing Izmir cards. When I'm getting past from the left, I'm seeing Bravos. So, but I'm not seeing those on either side, either the other side. So you can start to kind of figure out who's on each side, and where those are coming from. And the reason you want to pay attention to that ultimately is to figure out when you're in a draft and a color is what we call open, or a faction is open, meaning no one's drafting it, or it's they don't care that much about some of those cards or effects. And that is the opportunity when you want to kind of pick your third faction, in my opinion. You find whatever faction is most open, most synergistic with your deck, and start taking that because you're going to end up with a higher card quality overall when you do that. Sorry, I talked for a really long time. Jordan, go ahead and add your stuff
Yeah,
to that
no,
too.
no, no. It's all good stuff there for sure. Um, there is one last thing that I wanted to kind of touch on because some people do it, some people swear by it. I personally think it's kind of a trap unless the rest of
Mm,
the pack is kind of dead to
hmm.
you,
Yeah.
which is a topic of hate drafting. For those who are
Yep.
unaware, hate drafting is something you'll do once you get a good read of who's picking kind of what on each side. Is you'll pick that big spicy card that you know your opponent is going to grab just to deny them the ability to have that card in their deck. And the reason why I say it's kind of a trap is because some people will see it and be like, that's such a good strategy. They'll have no good cards. But on the flip side, that's a card that could have been good in your deck if you picked a different card. So that's why I say, please only hate draft if the rest of the pack you're not seeing anything that's synergistic or doesn't help you in any way. Because hate drafting means you're not picking something that is helping you win your game. And there's a very real chance that maybe you don't even make it to play that person and you hate drafted for no reason and then your secret plan backfires and, hate drafting that Muna card could have been a Kraken's Wrath in your deck and then you lost a game because you didn't have removal. So I say hate draft with care. It can be used effectively, but it is not something that you should just do willy nilly mainly because like I already said, I feel like it's a trap, especially for new players.
I only ever hate draft when I actually have nothing else useful. I will always take a like third or fourth copy of a card that I think is not even very good just to have the option, as opposed to hate drafting. Outside of like, I guess when I was playing Magic and I was kind of sweaty about it, and there were like really known quantities in draft, like decks that you knew people were going for, if like and there was like a meta game in draft where it's like, oh yeah, the mono black deck in this format is really strong, then I would not want to be drafting that deck because I don't want to compete with the five other people at the table who are like, yeah, it's the best deck, I want to draft it. And then I would hate draft out their mono black like kill cards and be like, well, I actually know 100% they're drafting this deck and I'm likely to play them. So I'm going to, I guess then I'll do it. But yeah, when you're doing your first drafts, don't even worry about it. Like when you're looking at signals, yes, it's to know what your opponents are taking, but it's not so that you can hate draft them. It's so that you can know what they aren't taking for yourself, or so you can know what they're taking so you can realize, wow, I really thought that Hydrocana would come back around. It's something we call wheeling in draft when you can get to the point in a draft where you know so well kind of what people are doing because you've seen these cards go around a couple of times. You've seen the faction that go around a couple of times. That you know that, well, if I pass this Hydrocana, it's probably going to come back to me again. And you can pass it expecting that it will wheel and go all the way around the table and come back to you again and take that. That's the reason you want to know what's open. And it's not so you can go, yeah, like I got to figure out what Jordan's drafting so I can make sure he doesn't get the good cards. It's like Jordan said, it's in your best interest just to take cards that you want.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the all important drafting rule that is above all else, where you throw strategy out the window. And when you see a unique, you draft it immediately, and it doesn't matter what else is in this pack.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no shame in rare drafting, right? Which is the idea of just taking cards that are valuable. There isn't any shame in that. At the end of the day, you paid for the draft. You get the experience you want to get out of it. I have 100% in my career many times gone like, well, if I take this card, it pays for my draft and my deck's going to be slightly worse. But then I've guaranteed, right? It's like you're taking the guaranteed thing. You're taking the boat instead of the mystery box. You want the boat.
For sure. I feel like there was something else I wanted to mention, but I think that covers all the finer points and tips that we wanted to address for drafting as a whole. Did you have any other final tips you want to give our fine viewers and listeners?
No, what I'd like to do is ask you guys to, if you have any additional tips, is there anything we missed, anything we didn't cover, or if you've had draft experiences you want to share, let us know in the comments down below. Would love to see your tips, share them, shout them out. And this week, it looks like we don't have any mailbag questions available. So would also like to put another call. We're looking for mailbag questions. If you go ahead and pop into the comments with that little hashtag mailbag and let me know, fill up our mailbag a little bit again with some more questions we can answer or things we can talk about on the podcast. We'd love to hear from you there too. So go ahead and pop down in there and let us know.
We look forward to hearing it. But as always, that was our fleeting thoughts. We thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you in about 2 weeks. Goodbye.
Good luck in your drafts, everyone. See ya.